Welcome, and thank you for joining me tonight. Before we begin, take a moment to settle into a comfortable position. Let your arms relax, let your shoulders soften, and take one slow, deep breath in. Then gently breathe out. As you get comfortable, I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight, and what time is it where you are? Whether it's early evening or the middle of the night, I'm glad you're here. Now, let the day slowly drift away as we begin tonight's peaceful story. Far beyond the crowded cities and busy trade routes, hidden among rolling hills covered in wild grass and pine trees, there stood an ancient monastery. The monastery was not famous. No kings visited it. No great treasures were stored there. No sacred relics attracted pilgrims from distant lands. In fact, many travelers passed nearby without ever noticing it. Yet among those who knew of its existence, a particular story was often told. The story concerned the monastery's gate. At first glance, the gate appeared ordinary. It was made of dark weathered wood. Time and weather had softened its edges. Vines climbed along the stone walls beside it. Nothing about it seemed unusual, until visitors noticed one curious detail. The gate had no lock. Not now, not ever. For generations, the gate had remained unlocked. Day and night, winter and summer, storm or sunshine. Anyone could enter. Anyone could leave. Many travelers found this strange. Some considered it careless. Others considered it dangerous. The monks never seemed concerned. Whenever visitors asked why the gate remained unlocked, the monks would simply smile and say, "Because freedom cannot be locked." Few people understood what they meant. Among those who did not understand was a young man named Jun. Jun arrived at the monastery during the spring of his 25th year. He carried a small travel bag and a very heavy heart. From the outside, his life appeared successful. His family owned prosperous farmland. His health was good. His future seemed promising. Yet inside, Jun felt trapped. Trapped by expectations. Trapped by fear. Trapped by the endless pressure to become someone important. Since childhood, people had told him what he should become. His parents had expectations. His teachers had expectations. His neighbors had expectations. Even he had expectations. Each year seemed to add another burden, another responsibility, another standard he was supposed to reach. At first, he pursued these goals eagerly, but over time, something changed. The more success he achieved, the less free he felt. Every accomplishment created new pressure. Every victory created new obligations. Every step forward seemed to tighten invisible chains around his life. Eventually, he became exhausted, not physically, spiritually. One evening, after months of inner turmoil, he left home and began wandering. Several weeks later, his journey brought him to the monastery. The first thing he noticed was the gate, or rather, the absence of a lock. He examined it carefully. Surely there had once been one. Yet he found no evidence. The gate simply swung open. A monk sweeping the courtyard noticed his curiosity. "You seem interested in the gate." Jun nodded. "It isn't locked." "No. Why?" The monk smiled. "You should ask the abbot." Jun was led to a garden behind the main hall. There he met an elderly teacher named Master Renzo. The old monk sat beneath a flowering cherry tree. Petals drifted gently through the air. The scene felt impossibly peaceful. Jun bowed respectfully. Then, almost immediately, he asked, "Why doesn't the monastery have a lock on its gate?" The abbot smiled. "Many people ask that." "And what do you tell them?" Renzo looked toward the entrance. Then he said, "The gate is unlocked because it was never meant to keep people in." Jun frowned. Most gates are meant to keep people out. Perhaps. The old monk picked up a fallen blossom. But some people build gates around themselves. The answer confused him, as many of the abbot's answers would. Over the following weeks, Jun remained at the monastery. At first, he intended only a short stay. Yet something about the place encouraged him to linger. The days followed a simple rhythm. Wake, meditate, work, eat, rest, repeat. Life moved slowly. No one seemed rushed. No one seemed obsessed with achievement. No one appeared concerned with status. For the first time in years, Jun felt space around his thoughts. Yet despite the peaceful environment, his inner struggles remained. Every morning, he compared himself to others. Every evening, he worried about the future. During meditation, his mind replayed old fears. Questions haunted him. What if I fail? What if I disappoint everyone? What if I make the wrong choice? What if I waste my life? One afternoon, while helping repair a stone pathway, he finally confessed these worries to Master Renzo. The old monk listened quietly. Then he asked, "Who is holding you captive?" Jun blinked. "What? Who is holding you captive?" The young man considered the question. "My responsibilities." The monk shook his head. "No." "My obligations." "No." "My circumstances." Again, the old monk shook his head. Jun grew frustrated. "Then what is it?" The abbot stood slowly. "Come." Together they walked to the monastery gate. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the ground. Birds sang from nearby trees. The gate stood open, exactly as it always had. The old monk pointed toward it. "What do you see?" "A gate." "What else?" "It's open." "Yes." The monk nodded. "Could you leave right now if you wished?" Jun hesitated. "Of course." "Would anyone stop you?" "No." The old monk smiled. "Then why do you speak as though you are imprisoned?" The question struck him deeply. For a moment he had no answer. Because the truth was uncomfortable. No one was forcing him to remain. No one was forcing him to pursue certain goals. No one was physically restraining him. Yet he still felt trapped. That evening, the question followed him everywhere. Who is holding you captive? The next morning, he noticed something while walking through the village below the monastery. A farmer worked happily in a small field. The man owned very little, yet he seemed content. Later, Jun passed a wealthy merchant. The merchant owned far more than the farmer, yet his face looked tense and worried. The contrast lingered in his mind. Perhaps freedom and circumstances were not the same thing. Months passed. Summer arrived. The hills turned green. Wildflowers bloomed. Jun continued practicing. Gradually, he became more aware of the stories running through his mind. Stories about success, stories about failure, stories about who he was supposed to be, stories about what others expected. For years he had accepted these thoughts as reality. Now he began questioning them. One morning during meditation, a surprising realization appeared. Much of his suffering came not from his actual life, but from his resistance to life. He constantly compared reality to an imagined version of how things should be. The gap between the two created misery. The insight felt both liberating and unsettling, because if he was creating part of his own prison, then he could no longer blame the world. Autumn arrived. Leaves began falling from the trees. One evening, a traveler visited the monastery. The man complained endlessly. His family disappointed him. His neighbors annoyed him. His work frustrated him. His life felt unfair. Jun listened carefully. As the traveler spoke, He recognized something familiar. The man sounded exactly like he once had. After the traveler left, Jun found himself laughing softly. For the first time, he could see the cage. Not a real cage, a mental one. A cage built from expectations, fears, resentments, and attachments. A cage without bars, a cage without walls, a cage maintained entirely by habit. That night he visited Master Renzo. "I think I understand the gate," the old monk smiled. "Do you?" "Partly." The abbot waited. Jun looked toward the entrance visible through the trees. Then he said, "The gate isn't locked because the prison was never outside." The old monk's eyes brightened. "Continue." "The prison is inside." The words surprised him even as he spoke them. The fears, the attachments, the beliefs, the stories, the endless need for life to be different. The old monk nodded. "Very good." For a while neither spoke. The evening breeze carried the scent of pine trees through the garden. Finally Renzo said, "Most people spend their lives trying to change the world so they can feel free." He paused. "The wiser path is discovering the freedom that already exists." Years later, Jun left the monastery, not because he was unhappy, not because he had failed, but because his time there had come to an end. Before departing, he stood before the gate one final time. The same gate, the same open doorway, the same absence of a lock. Yet everything felt different. When he first arrived, he believed freedom meant escaping obligations, escaping responsibility, escaping difficult circumstances. Now he understood something deeper. Freedom is not the absence of responsibility. Freedom is the absence of inner chains. A person can live in a palace and be imprisoned by fear. A person can live in a small hut and be completely free. Years passed. Jun built a life of his own. He worked, he married, he raised children, he faced challenges, he experienced loss, he experienced joy. Life remained unpredictable. Yet whenever difficulties arose, he remembered the gate, and he asked himself, "What am I resisting? What story am I believing? What chain am I carrying that no longer needs to be carried?" The questions rarely solved problems immediately, but they often revealed something important. The lock he feared was usually not real. The door was often already open. As an old man, Jun eventually returned to the monastery. The hills looked smaller now, or perhaps he had changed. The gate still stood exactly where it always had. Weathered, simple, unlocked. He smiled, then he walked through it. Not because he needed to enter, but because he finally understood. Freedom was never waiting on the other side of the gate. Freedom was the realization that it had never been locked in the first place. And perhaps that is the lesson. Many people spend years searching for freedom. They search in wealth, in success, in recognition, in distant places. Yet the chains that bind us most tightly are often invisible. Fear, attachment, expectation, the need to control, the need to be approved of, the need for certainty. And like the gate of the monastery, the door out of that prison is often already open. The question is not whether freedom exists. The question is whether we are willing to walk through. For sometimes, the greatest prison has no walls. And the greatest freedom begins the moment we realize the lock was only ever in our mind. As we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, let us turn to a tale about recognition and the true nature of worth. This is the next story. Long ago, in a quiet province of green valleys and distant mountains, there was a river that ran beside a small village. The river began high in the snow-covered peaks, where ice melted beneath the spring sun and flowed down through narrow stone channels. From there, it passed through pine forests, open fields, rice paddies, and finally beyond the village toward lands no one there had ever seen. The villagers depended on the river for almost everything. They drank from it. They washed clothes in it. They watered crops with it. Children played along its banks. Old people sat beside it in the evenings, listening to the current move over smooth stones. To the villagers, the river seemed constant. It was always there, always flowing, always reflecting the sky. Yet anyone who looked closely would notice something strange. The river was never truly the same. In spring, it swelled with melted snow. In summer, it glittered beneath the sun. In autumn, red and golden leaves floated across its surface. In winter, mist rose from it like breath. The river remained, and yet it changed every moment. Among the villagers lived a man named Ammon. Ammon loved the river more than anyone. As a child, he had spent countless afternoons sitting near the water with his younger sister, Sari. Together they built small boats from leaves and twigs. They raced them downstream. They laughed whenever one became trapped between stones. They believed those days would last forever, but nothing lasts forever. When Sari was 17, illness came to the village. Many recovered. She did not. Her death changed Ammon. After she was gone, the river no longer felt like joy. It became memory. Every stone, every bend, every sound reminded him of what had been lost. Years passed. Ammon grew into adulthood. He worked in the fields. He married. He raised a son. From the outside, his life continued. But inside, part of him remained beside the river with his sister. He often returned to the place where they had played as children. There, he would sit for hours, staring at the water. Sometimes he imagined hearing her laughter. Sometimes he whispered things he wished he had said. Sometimes he felt anger toward time itself. Why must things change? Why do people leave? Why does life take what we love? One evening, as Ammon sat near the river, an elderly monk approached along the bank. His name was Venerable Gyro. He lived in a small hermitage above the village and often walked beside the water at dusk. For many days, he had noticed Ammon sitting in the same place, always looking at the same bend in the river, always with the same sadness in his eyes. This evening, Gyro stopped beside him. "May I sit?" Ammon nodded. The monk lowered himself onto a flat stone. For a while, neither spoke. The river moved softly before them. Finally, Gyro asked, "What do you see?" Ammon looked at the water. "The river." The monk nodded. "The same river you saw yesterday?" "Of course." "The same river you saw as a child?" Ammon hesitated. "Yes." Gyro smiled gently. "Look again." Ammon frowned. The answer irritated him slightly. He had no patience for riddles. "It is the same river." The old monk dipped his hand into the current. Water moved around his fingers and continued downstream. Then he lifted his hand. "Where is the water I touched?" Ammon watched the current. "Gone." "And the water before us now?" "New water." The monk nodded. "So the river remains, but the water changes." Ammon said nothing. Gyro continued. "Your sorrow comes partly from loving what has passed." Ammon's face tightened. "My sister died. Yes, I cannot simply let that go. I did not ask you to." The old monk's voice was soft. "Letting go does not mean forgetting." Ammon looked at him. "Then what does it mean?" Gyro looked toward the river. "It means learning to love without demanding that life stop flowing." The words entered Ammon slowly, but they did not comfort him yet. Over the following weeks, the monk and Ammon often met beside the river. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they sat in silence. Jiro never told him to stop grieving. He never said sorrow was wrong. Instead, he invited Ammon to watch the river carefully, at dawn, at noon, at sunset, after rain, during mist, under moonlight. Gradually, Ammon began noticing changes he had ignored for years. The river's color shifted with the sky. Its sound changed with the season. Its depth changed after storms. Its banks changed as roots grew and stones moved. Even the place where he sat was not exactly the same. Grass had spread. A tree branch had fallen. Moss had grown along the stones. Everything was changing. Quietly. Constantly. Without asking permission. One autumn day, Ammon's son came to the river with him. The boy was 6 years old. He found several fallen leaves and began placing them in the current. One by one, the leaves floated away. The boy laughed and ran along the bank, trying to follow them. For a moment, Ammon felt a sharp ache in his chest. The scene was so much like his childhood with Sari that he could hardly breathe. His first instinct was to look away. The memory hurt too much. But then he remembered Jiro's words, love without demanding that life stop flowing. So he stayed. He watched his son laugh. He let the sadness come. He let the tenderness come too. For the first time in many years, grief and gratitude sat together in his heart. Neither erased the other. Both were true. That evening, Ammon told Jiro what had happened. The monk listened. Then he said, "You are beginning to understand the river." Ammon looked toward the water. "I still miss her." "Of course. Will that ever stop?" Jiro was quiet for a moment. Then he answered honestly, "Perhaps not completely." Ammon lowered his eyes. "But the shape of sorrow can change." The old monk picked up a fallen leaf. At first, grief may feel like a stone blocking the river. He placed the leaf into the water. But with time, it may become part of the current. The leaf drifted away, still present, still real, but moving. Years passed. Ammon continued returning to the river, but slowly, his relationship to it changed. It no longer belonged only to the past. It became part of the present again. He brought his son there. Then, years later, his daughter. He taught them how to make leaf boats. He showed them where the water ran fastest. He told them stories about their Aunt Sari, not with the frozen pain he once carried, but with warmth, with love, with a sadness that had softened into memory. One spring, heavy rains came. The river rose higher than anyone had seen in years. Water flooded several fields. A footbridge washed away. Villagers worked together to protect homes and repair damage. Ammon labored beside them. During the storm, he realized something. The river that nourished the village could also destroy. The river that carried childhood memories could also carry away bridges. The river was not gentle or cruel. It was simply flowing according to causes and conditions. Rainfall, snowmelt, wind, stone, earth, season. Everything shaped it, just as everything shaped human life. Joy, loss, love, fear, aging, change. No single moment stood alone. After the flood, the riverbank looked different. The old sitting place where Ammon had grieved for years was gone. The water had carved away part of the shore. At first, he felt a familiar sadness. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Even the place where he had mourned had changed. Life had not preserved it for him, and perhaps it was not meant to. That evening, he found Jiro at the hermitage. The monk was older now. His steps had slowed. His voice had grown softer. Ammon bowed and said, The river took my place. Jiro smiled. And what did it give you? Emon thought carefully. A new bank. The old monk nodded. Yes. Sometimes the teaching arrived as words, sometimes as water. Years continued passing. Emon became an elder of the village. Younger people often came to him when they suffered losses. A farmer whose harvest failed. A mother whose child moved away. A young man whose marriage ended. An old woman afraid of death. Emon never rushed her grief. He never offered easy comfort. Instead, he often walked with them to the river. There he would ask, "Is this the same river as yesterday?" Most answered yes. Then he would ask them to watch. The current, the light, the leaves, the stones, the endless movement. Eventually some would understand. Not immediately, but slowly, the way all deep truths are understood. One evening, a young woman named Mira came to him weeping. Her husband had died unexpectedly. "I cannot bear it," she said. "I want everything to be as it was." Emon listened quietly. He remembered that feeling, the desperate wish that time could reverse, that life could freeze at the moment before loss. He led her to the river. They sat together at dusk. The water reflected violet clouds. For a long while, Mira cried. Emon said nothing. When her tears softened, he spoke. "I once thought the river was cruel because it would not stop." Mira looked at him. "Was it?" "No." He watched the current move. "It was teaching me that love must learn how to flow." She did not answer, but her breathing slowed. The river continued. Years later, when Venerable Jiro was nearing death, Emon visited him daily. The old monk lay near the window of his hermitage, where he could hear the river below. One afternoon, Emon sat beside him. "I am afraid to lose you," he admitted. Jiro smiled faintly. "Good." Emon laughed softly through his sadness. "Good. It means you have loved." The old monk's breathing was slow. "Do not make grief your enemy." He turned his eyes toward the sound of water. "Only do not build a dam around it." A few days later, Jiro passed away. The village mourned him deeply. Emon walked alone to the river. He knelt at the bank and placed a flower into the current. It floated away, just as the leaves had floated away, just as childhood had floated away, just as every moment eventually moved beyond reach. But now Emon did not try to hold it. He bowed, not to death, not to loss, but to the great movement of life. Many seasons passed. Emon grew old. His hair turned white. His hands became thin. His children had children of their own. The village changed. New houses appeared. Old ones disappeared. People were born. People died. Fields shifted. Trees grew and fell. The river remained. And yet, always, it changed. One winter morning, Emon's granddaughter found him sitting by the water. She was a curious child with bright eyes. She sat beside him and asked, "Grandfather, is this the same river you saw when you were little?" Emon smiled. He had once answered that question too quickly. Now he took his time. "Yes," he said, "and no." The child frowned. "That does not make sense." He laughed gently. "No, not at first." Then he dipped his hand into the current. "The river has a name. It has a path. It has banks. In that way, it is the same." He lifted his wet hand. "But the water is always changing. The light is changing. The stones are changing. And we are changing too." His granddaughter watched the river carefully. Then she asked, "Is changing sad?" Emon looked across the water. Sometimes, often, beautifully, painfully, mercifully. But he answered simply, "It can be." Then he added, "But without change, nothing could grow." The girl thought about this. No flowers? No flowers? No babies? No babies? No birthdays? No birthdays? No spring? No spring. She became quiet. Then she nodded as if this was very serious. And perhaps it was. That evening, Ammon remained beside the river after she left. The sun lowered behind the mountains. The water turned gold. He thought of Sari, of his parents, of Jiro, of his younger self, of all the versions of life that had appeared, stayed briefly, and moved on. For a long time, he had believed impermanence was only loss. Now he understood it was also possibility. Because things change, wounds can soften. Because things change, children grow. Because things change, sorrow can become wisdom. Because things change, winter becomes spring. Because things change, a grieving young man can become a gentle old one. The river whispered over the stones, never holding the same water, never stopping, never clinging, never refusing its nature. And perhaps that is the lesson. Everything flows. Youth flows into age. Joy flows into memory. Grief flows into understanding. Moments arrive, shine briefly, and pass. We suffer when we demand that the river become a pond, when we try to freeze what was never meant to be frozen, when we ask life to remain unchanged so that our hearts will never ache. But life is movement. The river teaches this without words. It does not keep yesterday's water. It does not mourn the bend it has already passed. It does not rush ahead in fear of the sea. It simply flows. So when change comes, as it always does, remember the river. Let yourself grieve. Let yourself love. Let yourself remember. But do not demand that life stop moving. For the same current that carries things away also carries new things toward us. And if we learn to sit beside it with an open heart, we may discover that impermanence is not only the reason we suffer, it is also the reason healing is possible. As we move deeper into the quiet teachings of Zen, we come to a story about seeing clearly and understanding true value. Listen carefully to the next story. At the edge of a quiet valley stood a mountain so large that it seemed to hold the sky in place. Its peak disappeared into clouds. Its slopes were covered with pine forests, stone paths, and hidden streams. For generations, villagers had lived beneath its shadow. They planted rice in the fields below. They gathered herbs along its lower trails. They told stories about its storms, its caves, and its silence. To them, the mountain was not merely stone. It was a presence, steady, ancient, unmoving. In the village lived a young man named Aaron. Aaron was impatient. He did not think of himself that way. He called himself ambitious, determined, hard-working. But those who knew him well understood the truth. He wanted everything quickly. If he planted seeds, he wanted sprouts the next morning. If he practiced a skill, he wanted mastery within days. If he faced a problem, he wanted it solved immediately. Waiting frustrated him. Slow progress angered him. He admired anything fast. Fast rivers, fast horses, fast traders, fast success. But the mountain annoyed him. Each morning, when he stepped outside his home, there it stood, silent, massive, unchanged. While people hurried, the mountain remained. While seasons moved, the mountain remained. While villagers aged, married, argued, celebrated, and died, the mountain remained. One day, after failing again to master meditation, Aaron stormed out of the monastery hall. He had been sitting for only a short time, but his mind had wandered endlessly. Thoughts came, memories came, plans came, frustration came. Finally, he gave up. Outside, an elderly monk named Venerable Soren was sweeping the stone path. He looked at Aaron and smiled. "Your face is full of weather today." Aaron sighed. "I cannot do it." "Cannot do what?" "Meditate." Soren leaned on his broom. "What happened?" "My mind will not become still." "How long did you sit?" "Almost 1 hour." The old monk nodded. 1 hour. Aaron frowned. That should be enough to feel something. Soren looked toward the mountain. "Do you see that mountain?" "Of course." "Do you think it became a mountain in 1 hour?" Aaron looked annoyed. "That is different." "Is it?" The monk returned to sweeping. Aaron waited for further explanation. None came. Over the following weeks, Aaron continued struggling. He tried meditation, then abandoned it. He tried calligraphy, then grew frustrated. He tried learning herbal medicine, then complained that there were too many plants to remember. He began many things, finished few. Every time progress slowed, he decided the path must be wrong. One afternoon, after another failed attempt at meditation, he went to Soren again. "Master, I need a teaching that works faster." The old monk laughed softly. "Faster than what?" "Faster than this." Soren pointed toward the mountain. "Then go ask the mountain." Aaron stared at him. "The mountain?" "Yes." "What should I ask?" "Ask why it refuses to move." The instructions sounded foolish. But Aaron had learned that Soren's foolish instructions often carried meaning. The next morning, he climbed the lower trail. Mist covered the trees. Birds called from hidden branches. The air smelled of pine and wet stone. After walking for an hour, he reached a large rock overlooking the valley. From there, the village looked small. Smoke rose from rooftops. Fields spread like green squares below. Aaron sat facing the mountain peak. At first, he felt ridiculous. Then quietly he asked, "Why do you refuse to move?" The mountain did not answer. Of course. Only wind passed through the trees. Aaron waited. A few minutes, then longer. Soon he became restless. His legs hurt. His thoughts wandered. He stood to leave. Then he remembered why he had come. Impatience. So he sat again. The mountain remained silent. After several hours, he returned to the village with no answer. Soren was still sweeping. "Well?" the monk asked. "The mountain said nothing." Soren smiled. "Then perhaps you did not listen long enough." So Aaron returned the next day, and the next, and the next. Each morning, he climbed the trail and sat before the mountain. At first, he hated it. Nothing happened. No visions, no sudden wisdom, no dramatic change. Only sitting, only breathing, only watching clouds move around stone. But slowly, almost without noticing, Aaron began to see things. He saw that the mountain was not as still as he had imagined. Clouds touched it and passed. Rain darkened its rocks. Sunlight changed its colors. Streams moved down its sides. Trees grew from its slopes. Leaves fell. Snow melted. Birds nested. The mountain did not rush. Yet it was not lifeless. It changed slowly, deeply, patiently. One morning, after many weeks, Aaron noticed a tiny pine tree growing from a crack in a rock. It was no taller than his hand. Its roots had found the smallest space. Its needles trembled in the wind. "How long will it take you to become a great tree?" Aaron whispered. The answer came silently. Years, perhaps decades. And yet the tiny pine did not seem troubled. It simply grew. That day, something softened in Aaron. He realized he had been demanding from himself what nature never demanded from trees. Instant growth, instant strength, instant wisdom. He returned to Soren and said, "The mountain does move." The old monk looked pleased. "How?" "Slowly. And?" "So slowly that impatient eyes think it is standing still." Soren smiled. Good. Aaron continued. The trees grow slowly. The stones wear away slowly. The paths are formed slowly. Even the streams carve the mountain slowly. The monk nodded. And what does that teach you? Aaron was quiet. Then he answered, that slow change is still change. From that day, his practice changed. Not because meditation became easy. It did not. His mind still wandered. His knees still hurt. Frustration still appeared. But now he stopped expecting 1 hour to transform him. He sat each morning, sometimes peacefully, sometimes restlessly. But he sat, day after day, like water shaping stone, like roots entering rock, like the mountain becoming itself. Years passed. Aaron became calmer, not suddenly, gradually. Others noticed before he did. He interrupted less, listened more, finished tasks he once abandoned. When difficulties appeared, he no longer demanded immediate solutions. He learned to continue. One winter, a landslide blocked the main road to the village. The villagers panicked. They needed the road for trade. Many argued about what to do. Some wanted to abandon the route. Others cursed the mountain. Aaron listened quietly. Then he said, "We clear it one stone at a time." The work took many weeks. Each day, villagers removed rocks, mud, and broken branches. At first, progress seemed invisible, but slowly the path reappeared. One stone, then another, then another. By spring, the road was open. The villagers celebrated. Aaron stood quietly at the edge of the path, looking toward the mountain. He understood now. Great things rarely yield to one dramatic effort. They yield to steady effort repeated. Years later, young students came to Aaron for guidance. Many were like he had once been, impatient, eager, frustrated. They wanted peace quickly, wisdom quickly, success quickly. Whenever they complained, Aaron took them up the mountain trail. He showed them the tiny pine tree he had once discovered. By then, it had grown taller than a person, still small compared to the ancient trees, but strong, alive, rooted. "This tree is a teacher," Aaron would say. The students often looked confused. "It has never hurried." He would point to the rocks beneath it. It did not wait for perfect soil. It did not complain about the stone. It simply grew where life placed it. Then he would lead them to the overlook. Together, they would sit facing the mountain. Some students became restless within minutes. Others grew bored. A few became irritated. Aaron would smile. He understood. Then he would say, "The mountain has time to teach those who have time to listen." And perhaps that was the lesson. Patience is not doing nothing. Patience is steady effort without demanding immediate reward. Patience is trusting that small actions matter, even when results are not yet visible. The seed beneath the soil is not failing because we cannot see the sprout. The river is not failing because the canyon takes centuries to form. The meditator is not failing because the mind wanders. The heart is not failing because healing takes time. Some things grow slowly because they are meant to grow deeply. So when the path feels long, remember the mountain. It does not rush. It does not despair. It does not measure itself by one morning or one season. It remains. It receives rain. It receives snow. It receives sunlight. It changes quietly. And over time, even stone is shaped. So continue. One breath, one step, one day, one patient effort at a time. For the mountain that seems unmoving may be changing more deeply than anyone can see. Every autumn, the monastery disappeared beneath a sea of leaves. The temple sat on a hillside surrounded by ancient maple trees. For most of the year, the trees provided shade, beauty, and quiet companionship. But when autumn arrived, they released their leaves by the thousands. Red leaves, gold leaves, orange leaves, brown leaves. They drifted from the branches day after day. They covered the paths, the courtyards, the gardens, the rooftops, the stone steps leading to the meditation hall. No matter how often the monks swept, more leaves appeared. The work never seemed to end. Among the younger monks lived a novice named Jun. Jun disliked sweeping. He disliked many chores, but sweeping occupied a special place in his frustration. To him, the task felt pointless. Every morning he cleared the paths. Every afternoon they were covered again. Every evening even more leaves arrived. The work produced no lasting result. At least none he could see. Whenever assigned to sweeping duty, Jun sighed dramatically. Sometimes he complained openly, sometimes only inside his mind. But the dissatisfaction remained. One morning, after spending nearly an hour clearing the central courtyard, a gust of wind scattered fresh leaves across the stones. Jun stared in disbelief. The courtyard looked almost exactly as it had before. His shoulders slumped. "This is ridiculous." An elderly monk standing nearby heard him. His name was Master Ren. He was one of the oldest monks in the monastery, quiet, patient, rarely in a hurry. The old monk smiled. "What is ridiculous?" "The leaves." Master Ren glanced around. "They seem normal enough." Jun groaned. "I just swept all of this." The old monk nodded. "And now there are more." "Exactly." Jun pointed toward the trees. "What's the point?" The old monk considered the question carefully, then answered, "The point of what?" "Sweeping." The old monk smiled. "Perhaps you should find out." The answer irritated Jun, because it sounded like another one of those mysterious teachings monks seem to enjoy. The following morning, Jun resumed sweeping. The leaves remained. His frustration remained too. Yet Master Ren's words lingered. "Perhaps you should find out." Several days later, the novice noticed something strange. Whenever he swept, his mind wandered constantly. Sometimes he imagined future conversations. Sometimes he replayed old arguments. Sometimes he worried about mistakes. Sometimes he fantasized about doing something more important. His body swept leaves. His attention existed somewhere else entirely. The realization felt uncomfortable. One afternoon, Master Ren approached while Jun worked. Without saying anything, the old monk picked up a second broom and began sweeping beside him. The two worked silently for several minutes, then 10 minutes, then 20. Finally, Jun noticed something. The old monk moved differently. Each stroke of the broom seemed complete, unhurried, attentive, present. He did not appear bored, nor distracted, nor frustrated. He simply swept. Eventually, Jun asked, "What are you thinking about?" Master Ren smiled. "The leaves." The novice frowned. "Only the leaves?" "At the moment, yes." The answer seemed impossible. No one thought only about leaves. Did they? That evening, Jun reflected on the conversation. Perhaps the old monk exaggerated. Yet something about his presence felt genuine, peaceful, grounded. The following day, Jun decided to experiment. Instead of allowing his mind to wander endlessly, he focused on the broom. The sound of bristles moving across stone, the texture of the wooden handle, the movement of his arms, the leaves gathering into small piles. At first, the practice felt strange. His attention constantly drifted away, then returned, then drifted again. The process proved surprisingly difficult, yet also surprisingly interesting. For the first time, he noticed details he had overlooked for years. The shape of individual leaves, the sound of wind moving through branches, the scent of autumn air, the warmth of sunlight touching the courtyard stones. The work itself had not changed. His awareness had. Several weeks later, a traveling merchant visited the monastery. The man arrived exhausted. His business struggled. His family argued constantly. His mind felt overwhelmed. After speaking with several monks, he requested an audience with Master Ren. Jun happened to be sweeping nearby when the conversation occurred. The merchant bowed respectfully. "Master, how do I find peace?" The old monk looked thoughtful, then pointed toward Jun. The novice nearly dropped his broom. The merchant looked confused. "The boy?" Master Ren nodded. "Watch him." The merchant frowned. The novice felt embarrassed. He continued sweeping. Nothing special happened, just sweeping. Eventually, the merchant turned back toward the old monk. "I don't understand." Master Ren smiled. "Neither does he." The answer made even less sense. Yet somehow the merchant laughed. Several days later, he departed looking noticeably lighter. Jun never learned exactly what lesson he received. Years passed. The novice continued practicing mindfulness while sweeping. Not because he became enlightened, not because he suddenly loved chores, because the practice revealed something important. The quality of attention changes experience. When his mind resisted the task, suffering appeared. When his mind wandered constantly, boredom appeared. When he became present, something unexpected happened. The ordinary became interesting, not exciting, not dramatic, simply alive. One winter, heavy snow replaced the autumn leaves. The monastery paths required constant clearing. Many younger monks complained. The work felt endless. Jun, now older and more experienced, understood their frustration. One morning, a novice named Taro approached him. "How do you stay patient?" Jun smiled. "With snow, with all of it." The younger monk gestured broadly. "The chores, the repetition, the same things every day." Jun considered carefully, then asked, "Have you ever eaten a meal?" Taro blinked. "Of course." "And then become hungry again?" "Yes." Jun nodded. "Do you stop eating forever because hunger returns?" The novice laughed. "Of course not." The older monk smiled. "Then why expect sweeping to last forever?" The lesson landed gently. The work still needed doing. The leaves still returned. The snow still returned. Life itself operated this way. One breath, then another. One meal, then another. One day, then another. The repetition was not a flaw. It was reality. Several years later, Master Ren became seriously ill. Age finally began slowing him. The old monk spent more time resting, less time working. One autumn afternoon, Jun visited him. Leaves covered the courtyard outside. The sight brought back countless memories. Master Ren looked toward the window, then smiled. "The leaves seem busy." Jun laughed. "They always are." Silence settled between them. Finally, the older monk asked, "Did you ever discover the point?" Jun immediately knew what he meant. The sweeping, the leaves, the question from years ago. The younger monk smiled. "Yes." Master Ren waited. Jun looked out the window, then answered, "The leaves were never the point." The old monk's eyes brightened. "Go on." The sweeping wasn't about clearing the courtyard. "Not entirely." The elderly monk nodded. "What was it about?" Jun reflected carefully, then answered, "Being here." The old monk smiled. "Exactly." Several weeks later, Master Ren passed away peacefully. The monastery mourned deeply. The following morning, autumn leaves covered the courtyard. As always, Jun picked up a broom and began sweeping, not because the leaves would stay gone, they would not. Not because the work would end, it would not, but because the act itself mattered. One sweep, then another, then another. The years continued flowing. Jun eventually became one of the senior monks. Students often approached him with questions about meditation. Many expected complicated answers, advanced techniques, secret teachings. Instead, he frequently handed them a broom. At first, most students felt disappointed, some even annoyed. Yet eventually they discovered what he had learned. Mindfulness is not limited to meditation halls. It exists wherever attention exists. While walking, while eating, while washing dishes, while carrying water, while sweeping leaves. One spring, a visitor asked, "What is the most important practice in Buddhism?" Jun smiled, then looked toward a young novice sweeping the courtyard. The visitor followed his gaze. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, the visitor asked, "That's the answer?" Jun nodded. "If he is truly present, yes." The visitor looked puzzled. The monk smiled, because some lessons require experience, not explanation. And perhaps that is the lesson. Many people spend their lives waiting for important moments, special moments, meaningful moments. Meanwhile, ordinary life passes unnoticed. The meal, the walk, the conversation, the breath, the leaves. The Buddha repeatedly taught that awakening is not hidden in some distant future. It is found in direct experience, here, now, within this moment, whatever it contains. The monk who sweeps leaves mindfully is not merely cleaning a courtyard. He is training attention, cultivating presence, meeting reality directly. The leaves will return. Tasks will repeat. Life will continue unfolding in ordinary ways. Yet hidden within those ordinary moments lies extraordinary depth, if we are willing to notice. So when the mind complains about repetition, remember the leaves. When the task seems small, remember the broom. When life feels ordinary, remember the courtyard. For peace rarely arrives through dramatic events. More often, it appears quietly within the simple things we have stopped noticing. One breath, one step, one sweep at a time. With each step on the Zen path, a new lesson unfolds. Now we turn to a story about recognition, of self, of others, and of what truly matters. Listen carefully to the next story. The monastery stood halfway up a mountain where clouds often drifted through the courtyards like silent visitors. It was not a large monastery. No famous teachers lived there. No kings made pilgrimages to its gates. Most travelers passed by without noticing it. Yet those who stayed often left carrying something valuable. Not an object, not a secret teaching, something quieter. A different relationship with ordinary life. Among the monks living there was a man named Ren. Ren had entered the monastery when he was young. Now he was approaching middle age. He was respected by students, trusted by teachers, diligent in his practice. Yet there was one problem. Ren was rarely where he was. His body sat in one place. His mind occupied another. When walking, he thought about arriving. When eating, he thought about work. When working, he thought about rest. When resting, he thought about tomorrow. His attention constantly traveled ahead of him. The habit seemed harmless. Most people lived similarly. Yet it produced a subtle dissatisfaction that followed him everywhere. Nothing ever felt complete. No moment seemed enough, because each moment served mainly as a bridge toward another. Ren rarely noticed this directly. Like a fish unaware of water, he lived inside the habit without seeing it clearly. Then one autumn morning, a traveler arrived. The visitor was an elderly tea master named Jiro. His reputation stretched across several provinces. People spoke of his tea ceremonies with unusual reverence. Some called them art. Others called them meditation. A few called them teachings disguised as tea. The abbot welcomed him warmly. Several monks gathered eagerly, including Ren. At first, the younger monk expected discussions about tea leaves, preparation methods, ceremonial techniques. Instead, Jiro spent much of his first day quietly observing the monastery. He watched monks sweep paths, carry water, prepare meals, meditate. The attention he brought to simple activities felt unusual, as though every action deserved complete respect. That evening, Ren finally asked, "Master Jiro, what makes tea special?" The old man smiled. "Nothing." The answer surprised him. "Nothing. Tea is tea." Ren frowned. The tea master laughed softly. "The special part is attention." The words lingered, though their meaning remained unclear. The following morning, Jiro invited several monks to join him for tea. The gathering took place in a small room overlooking a garden. The space contained almost nothing. A low table, simple cushions, a kettle, tea bowls, silence. The simplicity immediately struck Ren. He expected elaborate decoration. Instead, everything unnecessary seemed absent. The old tea master entered carrying water. Nothing about his movements appeared dramatic, yet everyone watched. Not because he demanded attention, because he gave attention. Every gesture felt complete, intentional, present. The kettle was placed carefully, the bowls arranged carefully, the tea prepared carefully. No movement wasted, no movement rushed. The room grew remarkably quiet. Even the monks noticed. When the tea was finally served, Jiro handed a bowl to Ren. The monk accepted it politely, then immediately raised it toward his lips. "Wait." Ren paused. The old master smiled. "What are you doing?" "Drinking tea." Jiro nodded. "Already?" The monk looked confused. The tea master pointed toward the bowl. "What do you see?" Ren glanced down. "A bowl." "What else?" "Tea." The old man smiled. "Look again." Several moments passed. The monk noticed steam rising gently, tiny patterns on the ceramic surface, the warmth against his hands, subtle fragrance drifting upward, details he almost missed. The tea master nodded. "Now drink." Ren took a sip. The experience felt unexpectedly vivid, not because the tea differed, because his attention differed. Later that day, he approached Jiro privately. "I think I understand." The tea master smiled. "Wonderful." "What?" Ren hesitated, then laughed. "Perhaps I don't understand." The old man laughed too. "A good beginning." They walked slowly through the garden. Autumn leaves drifted from nearby trees. Eventually, Jiro asked, "When you drink tea normally, what else are you doing?" Ren thought carefully. The answer appeared quickly. Planning, remembering, worrying, thinking. The tea master nodded. "Exactly." The older man stopped walking, then pointed toward a leaf falling from a branch. The two watched silently. The leaf turned gently in the air, then landed softly on the ground. Nothing extraordinary occurred, yet the moment felt complete. The tea master smiled. "Most people miss their lives." Ren frowned. "What do you mean?" The old man continued walking. They are always somewhere else. The lesson disturbed him, not because it seemed incorrect, because it seemed correct. Over the following days, Ren began paying attention to his attention. The results surprised him. While eating breakfast, his mind discussed afternoon tasks. While performing afternoon tasks, his mind imagined evening rest. While resting, his mind reviewed unfinished work. The pattern appeared endless. One moment was rarely enough. The mind constantly reached elsewhere. The realization felt exhausting because it revealed a kind of endless postponement. Life happened now. Attention lived later. One afternoon, Jiro handed him a simple assignment. Drink 1 cup of tea. Ren smiled. That's easy. The tea master shook his head. No. The monk laughed. Of course it is. Then do it. The task seemed absurdly simple. Ren prepared tea, sat quietly, lifted the bowl. Immediately thoughts appeared. What comes next? What does this lesson mean? Am I doing it correctly? The tea cooled while his mind wandered. The realization felt humbling. Drinking 1 cup of tea completely required more attention than expected. Far more. Weeks passed. The tea master remained at the monastery. Ren continued learning, not through lectures, through ordinary activities. One morning, Jiro watched him sweeping leaves. After several minutes, the old man asked, "Where are you?" Ren looked around. The courtyard. The tea master smiled. "Your body is." The monk laughed, because he understood immediately. His thoughts were planning dinner. The broom moved automatically. Attention remained absent. The old man nodded. "Come back." Such a simple instruction, yet surprisingly difficult. Come back. To the broom, to the leaves, to the courtyard, to this moment, again and again. Winter arrived. Snow covered the mountain. The tea master prepared to leave. On his final evening, the monastery gathered for one last tea ceremony. The atmosphere felt bittersweet. The old man had become beloved. When the ceremony ended, Ren approached him. "Master." "Yes? What is the most important thing you taught me?" Jiro smiled, then poured one final cup of tea. Steam rose slowly into the air. The old man pointed toward it. "This." Ren frowned. "The tea?" The tea master shook his head. "This moment." The answer felt simultaneously simple and enormous. Years passed. Jiro eventually died. The monastery continued. Seasons changed. Students arrived. Students departed. Life unfolded. Yet the lesson remained. Ren became a teacher himself. The tea bowl became one of his favorite teaching tools. Students often arrived seeking wisdom, complicated answers, profound insights. Instead, he frequently offered tea. One afternoon, a young novice complained, "My meditation isn't improving." Ren poured tea. The student continued talking. The teacher continued pouring. The bowl filled, then overflowed. Tea spilled across the table. The novice jumped. "Master!" Ren smiled. "Yes? The bowl is full." The teacher nodded. "So is your mind." The student fell silent. The lesson landed immediately. Another year, a merchant visited the monastery. The man possessed wealth, success, influence, yet seemed deeply unhappy. During their conversation, he confessed, "I am always chasing something." Ren nodded. "What happens when you catch it?" The merchant paused. Another goal appeared, another target, another desire. The cycle never ended. The monk poured tea, then asked, "When was the last time you simply drank tea?" The merchant laughed. "What kind of question is that?" The monk smiled. "An important one." As the years continued, Ren noticed something fascinating. The quality of attention changed everything. Eating remained eating. Walking remained walking. Tea remained tea. Yet presence transformed the experience. Not because ordinary things became extraordinary, because they were finally experienced fully. Most people rush through life searching for important moments. Meanwhile, life quietly unfolded inside ordinary ones. A meal, a conversation, a breath, a cup of tea. The wisdom felt endlessly renewable. One spring, Ren climbed the mountain alone. Clouds drifted beneath him. The valley stretched into the distance. He carried a small kettle and a single tea bowl. Nothing else. After reaching a rocky overlook, he prepared tea. Slowly, carefully, exactly as Jiro once had. The process felt familiar, comforting, sacred. Not because tea itself was sacred, because attention was. The water boiled, the tea steeped, steam rose. Birds sang somewhere below. The wind moved gently through nearby pines. For a while, nothing existed beyond that moment. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, not memory, not anticipation. Only tea, only breath, only now. The experience felt profoundly peaceful and profoundly ordinary, both at once. Later that year, a student asked, "Master, how do I find peace?" Ren smiled. The question never changed, generation after generation, the same search, the same longing. He handed the student a cup of tea. The young monk looked confused. Ren gestured toward the bowl. The student stared, waiting. Eventually he asked, "What am I supposed to do?" The teacher smiled. "Drink it." The student frowned. "That's all." Ren nodded. "That is more than enough." The Buddha often taught that suffering arises when the mind abandons direct experience and becomes lost in craving, resistance, memory, or anticipation. We chase future moments, replay past moments, judge present moments, and in doing so, miss life itself. The monk and the cup of tea reveal something beautifully simple. Peace is rarely hidden. It is overlooked, not because it is far away, because it is very close. This breath, this sound, this sip, this step, this conversation, this moment. The mind says, something else matters more. The cup of tea says, be here. The mind says, later. The tea says, now. The mind says, when everything is solved, then I will be peaceful. The tea says, taste this, one sip at a time. And perhaps that is the lesson. Life is not waiting somewhere beyond this moment. It is this moment. The tea grows cold while we think about tomorrow. The conversation ends while we think about the next conversation. The sunset disappears while we plan the next day. Yet whenever we notice, we can return. Again, and again, and again. To the cup, to the breath, to the present. For the person who learns to drink tea completely may eventually discover that peace was never hiding in some distant future. It was quietly waiting in the steam, rising from an ordinary cup all along. As our exploration of Zen Buddhism deepens, let us listen to a story that reveals how true worth is often overlooked. Here starts the next story. The kingdom of Shun was famous for its splendor. Its capital city stretched across a broad river valley. Golden roofs gleamed beneath the sun. Markets overflowed with goods from distant lands. Musicians filled the streets with song. Merchants displayed silks, spices, jewels, and treasures gathered from every corner of the world. Visitors often stood speechless when they first entered the city. Everything seemed larger, brighter, more impressive. At the center of it all stood the royal palace. High walls surrounded elegant gardens. Marble walkways crossed courtyards filled with flowers. Fountains sparkled. Servants moved quietly through the halls. And within those halls lived Prince Ren. Ren was the only son of King Daichi. From the day he was born, people bowed before him. Servants obeyed him. Teachers praised him. Soldiers protected him. Every door opened when he approached. Every room made space for him. The prince never questioned these things. Why would he? They had always been true. He was not cruel, not intentionally. He simply assumed the world was arranged correctly. Kings ruled, servants served, nobles commanded, common people obeyed. The structure seemed natural, like rivers flowing downhill, like seasons changing, like the sun rising each morning. It never occurred to him that reality might look different from another perspective. One spring morning, the king summoned Ren to the throne room. The old king sat quietly upon his chair. Age had softened his movements, but sharpened his understanding. When Ren entered, the king smiled. "Sit." The prince obeyed. For several moments, neither spoke. Then the king asked, "What makes a good ruler?" Ren answered immediately. "Strength." The king nodded. "What else?" "Wisdom." The king nodded again. "What else?" The prince thought. "Authority." The king smiled. "Perhaps." The answer seemed strange. The king rarely said perhaps. Then the old ruler stood. "I have a task for you." The prince straightened immediately. "What task?" The king's eyes twinkled slightly. "I want you to leave the palace." Ren frowned. "For how long?" 30 days. The prince laughed, thinking it was a joke. The king did not laugh. Slowly, the smile disappeared from Ren's face. "You are serious." "Very," the king continued. "You will travel the kingdom. No royal clothing. No royal guards. No royal titles. You will carry only what you can carry yourself." The prince stared. "Why?" The answer came softly. "Because one day you may rule people you do not understand." 3 days later, Ren departed. He wore simple clothing, carried a small pack, possessed only a few coins. No one bowed, no one saluted, no one opened doors. The experience felt unsettling immediately. The first village he visited barely noticed him. The second treated him as any ordinary traveler. The third charged him for lodging. The prince could hardly believe it. Inside the palace, food appeared automatically. Outside, every meal required effort. Inside the palace, people anticipated his needs. Outside, no one cared. The lesson began immediately, though Ren did not yet recognize it. On the 7th day of his journey, he encountered an old beggar sitting beside a road. The man possessed almost nothing: a worn robe, simple sandals, a wooden bowl. That was all. The beggar sat beneath a tree calmly eating rice from the bowl. To Ren's surprise, he appeared content. The sight seemed impossible. How could someone with so little look so peaceful? Curiosity overcame him. He approached. The old man smiled. "Good afternoon." The prince nodded. "Good afternoon." Then he asked the question directly. "Why are you smiling?" The beggar laughed softly. "Should I not be?" The answer irritated him. Most people would be unhappy living like this. The old man glanced at the bowl, then at the sky, then at the tree providing shade. Perhaps. The conversation might have ended there. Instead, the beggar held out his bowl. "Would you like some rice?" The prince nearly laughed. The man possessed almost nothing, yet he offered to share. The gesture confused him. "No, thank you." The beggar nodded and resumed eating. The encounter lingered in Ren's thoughts long after he departed. Several days later, fate intervened. A storm struck unexpectedly. Heavy rain flooded roads. Strong winds damaged buildings. Travel became dangerous. By evening, Ren found himself stranded in a small village. The only available shelter was a crowded community hall. Farmers, merchants, laborers, travelers, everyone slept together. The prince felt uncomfortable, accustomed to privacy, accustomed to comfort, accustomed to space. That night, he barely slept. Yet something interesting happened. The villagers shared everything: food, blankets, stories, laughter. When one family ran short of supplies, another family helped. No one seemed concerned about status, only need. The prince watched carefully. The lesson remained quiet, but it was growing. Several weeks into the journey, Ren arrived in a mountain town. There, he unexpectedly encountered the beggar again. The old man sat near a market. The same bowl rested beside him. The same calm expression filled his face. The prince laughed. "How are you everywhere?" The beggar smiled. "How are you?" The answer surprised him. No one had asked that question sincerely in a long time. People usually asked what he wanted, what he needed, what he commanded, not how he was. The prince sat beside him, something he would never have imagined doing a month earlier. For several hours they talked. The old man spoke little about himself. Instead, he asked questions, thoughtful questions, difficult questions, questions that lingered. Eventually, Ren asked, "Were you always a beggar?" The old man smiled. "No." "What were you before?" "A merchant." The answer shocked him. The man explained. Years earlier, he possessed wealth, property, success, influence. Then a series of misfortunes destroyed everything. At first, he suffered terribly, not because he lost possessions, because he lost identity. Eventually, he discovered something unexpected. Peace remained possible, even without status, even without wealth, even without recognition. The realization changed his life. The prince listened carefully. The story disturbed him, because it challenged assumptions he never questioned. Toward the end of the 30 days, Ren visited one final village. The harvest had failed there. Food remained scarce. Many families struggled. Yet despite hardship, the villagers organized a shared meal. Everyone contributed something, even if only a little. An old woman brought vegetables. A farmer contributed rice. A fisherman offered dried fish. Children carried water. The meal was modest, yet the atmosphere felt warm, generous, human. While eating, Ren noticed something remarkable. No one asked who possessed the most. No one demanded special treatment. No one cared about status. The hungry received food. The tired received rest. The sick received care. The simplicity moved him deeply. For the first time, he understood something. Human worth and social status were not the same thing, not even close. On the 30th day, Ren returned to the palace. Servants greeted him. Guards saluted him. Doors opened automatically. Everything appeared unchanged, yet he felt completely different. The king noticed immediately. "You learned something." The prince nodded. "Yes." The old ruler smiled. "What?" Ren remained silent for several moments, then answered, "I met a man with nothing." The king waited. "And he had more peace than many nobles." The king nodded. The prince continued, "I met people who owned almost nothing, yet shared everything." The king nodded again. "And I realized something." The old ruler leaned forward. "What?" The answer came quietly. "A crown does not make a person important." Silence filled the room. Then the king smiled. A genuine smile, the kind only fathers possess. Several months later, Ren requested permission to leave the palace again. The king approved. This time, however, the prince traveled voluntarily, not because he needed another lesson, because he wished to maintain the one he had already received. Whenever he visited villages, he listened. Whenever he met farmers, he listened. Whenever he met laborers, merchants, fishermen, or travelers, he listened. The habit gradually transformed him into a different kind of leader. Years later, after becoming king, Ren established an unusual tradition. Once each month, he ate among ordinary citizens. No throne, no ceremony, no special treatment. At first, the nobles objected. The king ignored them. Over time, the practice became famous, not because it was dramatic, because it revealed something rare: humility. The people loved him for it, not because he pretended to be one of them, because he genuinely respected them. The difference mattered. Late in life, King Ren visited the roadside tree where he first met the beggar. The old man had long since passed away. Only the tree remained. The king sat beneath it quietly. For a long time he remembered. The bowl, the rice, the offer to share, the lesson. Then he smiled, because the greatest gift the beggar ever offered was not food, it was perspective. And perhaps that is the lesson. The Buddha repeatedly challenged social hierarchies, not through rebellion, through insight. He taught that all beings possess the same fundamental nature, the same capacity for wisdom, the same capacity for suffering, the same capacity for awakening. The prince and the beggar's bowl reminds us that status is not the same as worth. Titles are not the same as character. Wealth is not the same as peace. Power is not the same as wisdom. A person may sit upon a throne and remain deeply lost. Another may sit beside a road with a wooden bowl and possess profound understanding. Humility begins when we recognize this truth. The moment we stop measuring people by position, the moment we start seeing the human being beneath the title. For every crown eventually passes, every fortune eventually changes, every social role eventually ends. But kindness remains kindness, wisdom remains wisdom, compassion remains compassion. And the person who understands this becomes free from one of humanity's oldest illusions, that some lives matter more than others. For beneath every crown and beneath every beggar's robe beats the same human heart. Continuing along the path of Zen insight, we pause now to hear a teaching about perception and hidden value. Listen carefully to the next story. Long ago, at the edge of a vast forest, there stood a small village whose people rarely traveled beyond the trees. The forest was ancient. Its towering pines stretched high into the sky. Its winding paths twisted through valleys and over hills. During the day, sunlight filtered through the branches in golden beams. But at night, the forest became something entirely different. The darkness beneath the trees was so deep that travelers often felt as though they were walking through a sea of shadows. Stories were told about the forest. Some claimed spirits wandered among the trees. Others believed strange creatures lived beyond the paths. Children grew up hearing warnings never to enter the woods after sunset. Most obeyed. Yet among the villagers lived a young man named Aaron, who was troubled by fear. Fear seemed to follow him everywhere. He feared making mistakes. He feared disappointing others. He feared illness, failure, loss, and uncertainty. He feared speaking when others were silent. He feared remaining silent when others expected him to speak. Even small decisions often filled him with worry. At night, he would lie awake, imagining all the terrible things that might happen tomorrow. The strange thing was that very few of those things ever happened. But fear did not seem to care about facts. It lived comfortably inside his mind. The more he listened to it, the stronger it became. One autumn evening, a wandering monk arrived in the village. He was elderly, with silver hair and kind eyes. His name was Venerable Surya. The villagers welcomed him warmly and invited him to stay. During the following days, many people came to hear his teachings. Arun attended every gathering. He listened carefully as the monk spoke about suffering, mindfulness, compassion, and the nature of the mind. One afternoon, after everyone else had left, Arun remained behind. "Master," he said, "I have a question." Surya smiled. "Then ask." Arun lowered his eyes. "I am afraid all the time." The monk waited quietly. "I know many of my fears are unreasonable. I know most never happen. Yet they continue to control me." The monk nodded. "And what is it that you wish for?" "I want fear to disappear." The old monk looked toward the forest visible beyond the village. Then he asked, "Have you ever crossed the forest at night?" Arun's eyes widened. "Never." "Why not?" "Because it is dangerous." The monk smiled gently. "Is it?" Everyone knew it was, or at least everyone believed it was. The monk stood. "Come meet me tomorrow evening." "Where?" "At the entrance to the forest." Arun immediately felt uneasy, but he agreed. The following day passed slowly. As sunset approached, his stomach tightened. Part of him wanted to stay home. Part of him wanted to invent an excuse. Yet something inside him knew he needed to go. When evening arrived, he found Surya waiting at the forest's edge. The monk carried a small lantern. Its warm golden light flickered softly in the growing darkness. Arun looked at the forest nervously. "You want us to go inside?" "Yes." The young man swallowed hard. "But it will soon be dark." "That is true." "Shouldn't we wait until morning?" Surya shook his head. "The lesson is tonight." Reluctantly, Arun followed. The path disappeared beneath the trees. The sounds of the village faded behind them. Soon only the rustling leaves and distant calls of night birds remained. Darkness surrounded them. The lantern illuminated only a small circle of ground, perhaps 10 steps ahead. No more. Arun stared beyond the light. The forest seemed endless. The shadows looked alive. Every strange sound made him jump. After several minutes, he finally spoke. "Master." "Yes?" "This lantern is too small." The monk continued walking. "Is it?" "It only lights a few steps." "That is true. How will we cross the entire forest?" The old monk smiled. "The same way we cross every forest." Arun frowned. "I don't understand." "One step at a time." The young man looked ahead. The darkness seemed overwhelming. The path disappeared completely beyond the lantern's glow. "But I cannot see the end." "You do not need to." They walked in silence. The lantern illuminated the next few steps, then the next few, then the next. Hours seemed to pass. Gradually, Arun noticed something surprising. Although he could only see a short distance ahead, he never lacked enough light for the step he was currently taking. The lantern never showed him the entire journey. Yet somehow the journey continued. Eventually they reached a small clearing. The moon shone overhead. Surya sat upon a fallen log. Arun sat beside him. For a while neither spoke. Then the monk asked, "What troubles you most about the future?" Arun laughed softly. "Which part?" "Any part." The young man thought carefully. "I worry about losing my family." The monk nodded. "What else?" "I worry about becoming ill." "What else?" "I worry about failing." What else? Aaron continued listing fears, one after another. Some were large, some were small, some were likely, some were highly unlikely. Eventually he ran out of things to say. The monk listened patiently to every word. Then he lifted the lantern. "Tell me," he said, "how far can this lantern shine?" "Only a few steps." "And yet we crossed much of the forest." "Yes." "Could we have crossed it if we had refused to move until we could see the entire path?" Aaron shook his head. "Of course not." The monk smiled. "That is how many people live." The young man listened. They demand certainty before taking action. They want guarantees before making decisions. They want complete visibility before beginning a journey. The monk looked into the darkness surrounding the clearing. But life does not work that way. Aaron felt something stir inside him. The old monk continued, "The future is like this forest at night. You cannot see all of it. You never will. No one can. Not kings. Not scholars. Not monks." The lantern flickered gently. What wisdom does provide is enough light for the next step. Aaron remained silent. He thought about all the years he had spent demanding certainty from life. All the years he had waited for fear to disappear before moving forward. All the opportunities he had avoided because he could not see the entire path. Perhaps that had been his mistake. Perhaps courage was not the absence of fear. Perhaps courage was taking the next step anyway. They remained in the clearing until the stars filled the sky. Then they began walking again. The forest seemed different now, still dark, still mysterious, but less threatening. The shadows had not changed. His relationship to them had. For the first time, Aaron noticed details he had previously ignored. The fragrance of pine needles, the cool evening air, the distant sound of flowing water, the beauty of moonlight filtering through branches. Fear had occupied so much space in his mind that he had forgotten to experience the world itself. As they walked, they encountered a fallen tree blocking the path. Aaron immediately stopped. "We cannot continue." The monk handed him the lantern. "Look again." Aaron lifted the light. To one side of the fallen trunk was a narrow opening, a path around the obstacle. He smiled. "There's another way." "Often there is," said Surya. A little later they reached a stream. Again Aaron hesitated. The water appeared deeper than expected. But with the lantern he discovered stepping stones crossing safely to the other side. Obstacle after obstacle appeared. And each time the lantern revealed enough. Never everything. Always enough. Near midnight they emerged from the far side of the forest. A broad valley stretched before them. The stars reflected in a quiet lake. The view was breathtaking. Aaron stood speechless. He had lived near the forest his entire life, yet fear had prevented him from ever discovering this place. The monk watched him carefully. "What do you see?" "A beautiful valley." "What else?" Aaron thought for a moment. Then he smiled. "I see what fear has hidden from me." The old monk nodded. For several years after that night, Aaron often carried a lantern. Not because he needed it, but because it reminded him of the lesson. Whenever fear appeared, he asked himself a simple question. What is the next step? Not the next 100 steps, not the entire future, just the next step. When he wanted to start a new venture but felt uncertain, he focused on the next step. When he faced difficult conversations, he focused on the next step. When sickness visited his family, he focused on the next step. When loss eventually arrived, as it always does in every human life, he focused on the next step. Little by little, he discovered that most suffering came not from the present moment itself, but from attempting to carry an entire future at once. Years later, after Venerable Surya had continued his travels, Arun became known as one of the wisest men in the region. People often came seeking advice. One evening, a frightened young woman arrived. "I don't know what to do with my life," she said. "There are too many possibilities. What if I choose wrong?" Arun smiled. Then he handed her an old lantern, the same lantern Surya had once carried. "How far does this light reach?" he asked. She looked carefully. "Only a short distance." "Then perhaps that is all you need." The woman looked confused, so Arun told her the story of a dark forest, a wandering monk, a small lantern, and the lesson that changed his life. When he finished, she sat quietly for a long time. Then she smiled. For the first time that evening, her shoulders relaxed. She finally understood. Life was never meant to be traveled with complete certainty. The path unfolds as we walk it. Wisdom does not illuminate every year ahead. It illuminates this moment, this decision, this breath, this step. And perhaps that is enough, for the future has always been a dark forest, yet countless people have crossed it before us, not because they could see the entire journey, but because they trusted the light they had. And so, whenever fear whispers that you cannot continue because you cannot see the whole path, remember the little lantern. Remember that even the brightest lantern cannot illuminate the entire forest. Yet, it can always illuminate the next step. And sometimes, that single step is all that is needed to begin a journey that changes everything. In a quiet village beside a vast lake, there lived a fisherman named Taro. The lake was famous throughout the region. Its waters stretched so far that on misty mornings it seemed to merge with the sky itself. The villagers depended upon it. They drank from it. They traveled across it. Most importantly, they fished from it. For generations, the lake had provided enough for everyone. No one became wealthy. No one starved. Life moved at a gentle pace. The fishermen rose before dawn, cast their nets, and returned home before sunset. Among them, Taro was considered one of the most skilled. His hands knew every knot. His eyes could read the water. He understood the habits of fish better than most. Yet despite his talent, Taro was rarely satisfied. Whenever he caught 10 fish, he wished for 20. If he caught 20, he wanted 40. When his neighbors celebrated a good day, Taro compared his catch to someone else's. There always seemed to be a reason he could not enjoy what he already had. At first, few people noticed. After all, ambition can sometimes resemble determination. But over the years, his desire for more grew stronger, like a fire constantly demanding new fuel. The strange thing was that the more he acquired, the less content he seemed. One summer morning, as fishermen prepared their boats, an old traveler arrived in the village. He carried no possessions except a walking staff and a small cloth bag. His robes were faded from years of travel. His face was lined by age, yet his eyes held an unusual brightness. The villagers welcomed him warmly. Travelers often brought stories from distant lands. That evening, people gathered near the shore to hear him speak. The old traveler told tales of mountains, deserts, temples, and forests. The villagers listened with fascination. Eventually, someone asked, "Of all your journeys, what is the most valuable thing you have learned?" The traveler smiled. Then he answered, "The difference between enough and more." The villagers exchanged curious glances. The answer seemed surprisingly simple. Only Taro frowned. It sounded like the sort of thing someone said when they had never owned much. Several days later, the traveler remained in the village. Each morning he walked beside the lake. Each evening he sat quietly watching the sunset. Eventually, Taro approached him. "You speak often about contentment." The old man nodded. "Yes." "Do you not believe people should improve their lives?" "Of course." "Then why stop at enough?" The traveler smiled gently. "Who said anything about stopping?" The answer irritated Taro. Much like many wise answers often do, he wanted certainty, definitions, rules. Instead, he received questions. Several weeks later, something extraordinary happened. Taro was fishing alone near the deepest part of the lake when he saw a flash beneath the water. At first, he thought it was sunlight. Then, he saw it again. A brilliant golden shimmer moving through the depths. His heart raced. Slowly, he cast his net. Carefully, patiently. The shimmering shape approached. Moments later, his net tightened. The catch struggled. The boat rocked. With enormous effort, Taro pulled the net aboard. Inside lay the most beautiful fish he had ever seen. Its scales gleamed like polished gold. Even beneath the cloudy sky, it seemed to glow. Taro stared in amazement. He had never seen anything like it. Neither had anyone else. For several minutes, he simply admired it. Then a thought appeared. How much would this fish be worth? The question arrived quietly, but it did not leave. By the time he returned to shore, his imagination had already begun working. Merchants would pay fortunes. Nobles might compete to own it. Perhaps the king himself would purchase it. His life could change completely. News spread quickly. The entire village gathered to see the golden fish. People marveled at its beauty. Children stared with wide eyes. Even the old traveler seemed impressed. "What will you do with it?" someone asked. Taro smiled. "I don't know yet." But secretly he had already decided. He would sell it and become rich. That night he barely slept. His mind raced with possibilities. A larger home, more boats, more nets, more land, more status, more comfort, more security, more. The next morning, he loaded the fish into a large water barrel and began preparing for the journey to the nearest city. Before departing, he stopped near the lake. The old traveler happened to be sitting there. The two men watched the water quietly. Then the traveler asked, "Are you happy?" Taro laughed. "Of course." The old man nodded. "More happy than yesterday?" The question seemed strange. Naturally, the traveler looked toward the fish. "Interesting." Taro frowned. "What does that mean?" The old man smiled. "Nothing." Then he returned to watching the lake. The journey to the city took 2 days. Throughout the trip, Taro imagined his future. Every hour his expectations grew larger. By the time he arrived, no amount of money seemed sufficient. The first merchant made an offer. Taro rejected it. Too low. The second merchant offered more. Still too low. The third offered a fortune greater than Taro had ever imagined. Yet somehow it no longer felt like enough. Surely someone else would pay more. Days passed, then weeks. The fish remained alive but grew weaker. Its scales lost some of their brilliance. Its movements became slower. Still, Taro waited. The perfect offer had not yet appeared. One evening, while sitting beside the barrel, he suddenly noticed something. The fish looked sad. The thought felt absurd. Yet he could not shake it. The golden creature moved slowly through the confined space, circling endlessly. The lake was gone. Its freedom was gone. Its life had become a transaction. For the first time, discomfort entered his heart. That night, he slept poorly. The following morning, he walked through the marketplace. There he encountered a poor fisherman selling a modest catch. The man earned only a fraction of what Taro had already been offered, yet he seemed cheerful. He greeted customers warmly. He laughed easily. His children played nearby. The sight troubled Taro. How could someone with so little appear so content? The question followed him all day. By evening, he realized something uncomfortable. For weeks he had possessed something extraordinary, yet he had not enjoyed a single moment of peace. Every day had been consumed by wanting more. More money, more profit, more advantage. The golden fish had not made him happy. It had made him hungry. Hungry for things that did not yet exist. Hungry for possibilities. Hungry for a future forever moving beyond reach. The realization struck him like a wave. The next morning, before sunrise, he loaded the barrel onto a cart. Then he began the long journey home. Several days later, he reached the lake. The villagers gathered once again. What happened? Did you become rich? Did you sell it? Taro said nothing. He simply rolled the barrel to the water's edge. The golden fish floated quietly inside. Its once brilliant scales had become dull. Slowly, Taro lifted it into the lake. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the fish moved, at first cautiously, then more strongly, then with sudden energy. The golden scales caught the sunlight once more. The fish disappeared into the depths. Gone. The crowd stood silently. Some thought he was foolish. Others thought he was wise. Taro himself wasn't entirely sure, but he felt something he had not felt for many weeks. Relief. That evening he found the old traveler sitting by the shore. The old man smiled. Did you find what you were looking for? Taro sat beside him. After a long silence, he answered, No. The traveler nodded. What did you find instead? Taro watched the sunset reflecting across the water. Then he smiled. Enough. The old traveler laughed softly. The sound blended with the gentle waves. Years later, Taro often told the story to younger fishermen. Most assumed the lesson was about greed. Partly, but not entirely. The deeper lesson was more subtle. Greed is not simply wanting things. It is believing that happiness always exists one step beyond where you are. One more catch, one more achievement, one more purchase, one more success, one more tomorrow. Yet tomorrow keeps moving, like the horizon, always visible, never reached. Contentment is different. Contentment does not mean refusing growth. It does not mean rejecting ambition. It simply means appreciating what already exists while moving forward. The lake continued providing fish. The seasons continued changing. Life continued unfolding. Some days brought abundance. Others brought empty nets. Yet strangely, after releasing the golden fish, Taro found more peace during ordinary days than he ever had while possessing something extraordinary. One autumn evening, many years later, he sat alone at the shore. The water reflected the setting sun. His fishing net lay beside him. The day's catch had been small, only a few fish, nothing remarkable, nothing rare, nothing golden. Yet as he watched the lake grow quiet beneath the fading light, he realized something. His net might be nearly empty, but his heart was full. And perhaps that was the greatest catch of all. As we drift deeper into the still waters of Zen, a quiet teaching begins to rise, one that speaks of clarity and of value not always seen. Listen gently now, The next story begins. Long ago, in a fertile valley surrounded by rivers and distant mountains, there lived a woman named Lila. If you had met her, you might have thought she was fortunate. She had a comfortable home, a loving husband, healthy children, enough food to eat, enough work to keep her occupied. To most people, her life appeared peaceful. Yet Lila carried a burden heavier than any sack of rice, any basket of firewood, or any load a traveler might carry along the mountain roads. She carried tomorrow, every day, every hour, every moment. When she woke in the morning, she worried about next week. When she ate lunch, she worried about next year. When she lay down to sleep, she worried about problems that had not yet arrived. Her mind lived in a future that did not exist. And because of this, she rarely experienced the life that was actually happening. If her children laughed in the garden, part of her wondered whether they would remain healthy. If the harvest looked strong, she worried about next season's weather. If her husband returned safely from town, she imagined accidents that might happen tomorrow. Even during happy moments, fear quietly followed her. Not because anything terrible was happening, but because something terrible might happen. The possibilities never ended, and neither did her worrying. At first, she believed her worry was useful. She told herself it made her responsible, prepared, careful. But over time, worry began consuming her peace, then her energy, then her joy. Gradually, she stopped noticing the beauty around her, the changing seasons, the songs of birds, the warmth of shared meals, the laughter of friends. Everything became overshadowed by what might happen next. One spring morning, as she hung laundry beside the river, her elderly neighbor watched her pacing back and forth. The neighbor's name was Amma. She was nearly 80 years old. Her back was bent, her hair completely white, yet her eyes carried an unusual calmness. People often visited her when life became confusing, not because she had all the answers, but because she seemed deeply at peace. As Lila paced nearby, Amma finally asked, "What are you carrying?" Lila stopped. "Carrying?" The old woman nodded. "You walk as though you are carrying something heavy." Lila laughed. "My hands are empty." Amma smiled. "Are they?" The question lingered, but Lila simply shook her head and continued working. That evening, she worried about the coming harvest. The next day, she worried about a rumor of rising prices in the city. The day after that, she worried about a cough her youngest son developed. The cough disappeared within 2 days. The worry remained. Weeks passed, then months. Summer arrived. The valley grew green and abundant. Yet Lila's mind remained trapped in futures that had not happened. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, she sat beside the river watching the current flow past. The water moved steadily, effortlessly. Nearby, Amma sat mending a basket. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Lila sighed. "I am tired." The old woman nodded. "Yes." "I sleep enough." "Yes." "I eat enough." "Yes." "Then why am I always tired?" Amma placed the basket aside. Then she pointed toward the river. "What do you see?" "Water." "What else?" "A current." The old woman nodded. "Imagine carrying a bucket of that river." Lila frowned. "What do you mean?" "Fill a bucket and carry it." Lila laughed. "It would be heavy." "Yes." The old woman smiled. "Now imagine carrying tomorrow." Lila fell silent. For the first time, she understood what Amma had been asking. The old woman continued. "Most people carry today's responsibilities." She pointed toward the river. "You carry today's responsibilities, tomorrow's responsibilities, next month's responsibilities, and problems that may never arrive. The words struck deeply because they were true, painfully true. Yet understanding the problem and solving it were not the same thing. The next morning, Lila woke determined to worry less. Within an hour, she was worrying about whether she would succeed. The irony was not lost on her. Several days later, Amma invited her for tea. The old woman's home overlooked the valley. From her porch, the entire landscape could be seen: fields, forests, rivers, mountains. As they drank tea, Amma handed Lila a large basket. "Hold this," Lila did. It was empty. "Heavy?" "No." The old woman placed a single stone inside. "Now?" "A little heavier." Then another stone, and another, and another. Soon the basket contained dozens of stones. Lila shifted uncomfortably. The weight increased rapidly. Finally, the basket became difficult to hold. Her arms began trembling. After several minutes, she set it down. Immediately, relief flooded through her body. Amma smiled. "The basket is your mind." Lila listened carefully. "The stones are your worries." The old woman pointed toward the basket. "One stone may not seem significant, but enough stones carried long enough become exhausting." Lila stared at the basket. The lesson felt obvious, yet she had never truly seen it before. The following weeks became an experiment. Whenever she noticed herself worrying about something far in the future, she imagined placing another stone into the basket. At first, the practice revealed something surprising. Her mind generated far more worries than she realized. Dozens every day, sometimes hundreds. Most concerned events that never occurred. Others involved situations she could not control. Many contradicted one another. The realization was humbling. One afternoon, her husband returned from town later than expected. Immediately, her mind began creating stories: an accident, an illness, a robbery. Disaster after disaster unfolded in her imagination. Then she remembered the basket, another stone. She took a breath, then another. An hour later, her husband arrived home smiling. A wagon wheel had broken on the road. Nothing more. The imagined disasters vanished. Yet she noticed something important. The worry had not protected him. It had only exhausted her. Months passed. Slowly, Lila became more aware of her mental habits. Not free from them, aware of them. That alone changed many things. One autumn, the harvest was threatened by several weeks of unusual weather. Many villagers became anxious. Lila felt the familiar urge to spiral into fear. What if the crops fail? What if food becomes scarce? What if winter is difficult? Then she paused. She asked herself a simple question. What can I do today? The answer was clear. Help gather the crops that were ready. Store food carefully. Support her neighbors. The future remained uncertain, but today's actions were available. For the first time, she experienced the difference between preparation and worry. Preparation created movement. Worry created paralysis. Preparation solved problems. Worry rehearsed them. The distinction transformed her understanding. One winter evening, a traveling monk arrived in the village. The villagers gathered to hear his teachings. The monk spoke about many things: impermanence, compassion, mindfulness. Then he said something that immediately captured Lila's attention. The future is a useful servant, but a terrible home. The entire room grew quiet. The monk continued. Many people visit tomorrow. There is nothing wrong with that. We must plan. We must prepare. We must learn from the past and consider the future. He paused. The problem begins when we move there permanently. Lila felt as though the words were directed specifically at her. For years she had been living in tomorrow, not visiting, living. The monk smiled gently. You cannot breathe tomorrow's air. You cannot eat tomorrow's food. You cannot walk tomorrow's path. The only place life can ever be experienced is here. The lesson stayed with her long after the monk departed. Years continued passing. Gradually, the people closest to Lila noticed changes. She laughed more easily, listened more carefully, rushed less. When problems appeared, she handled them calmly, not because she stopped caring, but because she stopped carrying every possible future simultaneously. One spring morning, her youngest daughter asked, "Mother, why do you smile so much now?" Lila laughed. Then she thought carefully before answering. "Because I finally put down something very heavy." The child looked around. What was it? Lila pointed toward the sky. Clouds. The daughter looked confused. What? Lila smiled. I spent years trying to carry clouds. The child laughed, and perhaps that was the perfect answer. Many years later, when Amma grew very old and her final days approached, Lila visited her often. One evening they sat together watching the sunset. The valley glowed gold. Birds crossed the sky. The river reflected the fading light. Amma looked peaceful, very peaceful. Lila asked, "Were you ever afraid of tomorrow?" The old woman smiled. Of course. The answer surprised her. You were. Many times. Then how did you become so calm? Amma looked toward the horizon. Then she answered, I stopped trying to arrive before I got there. The words settled deeply into Lila's heart. A few days later, Amma passed away quietly in her sleep. The village mourned her, yet everyone agreed she had lived well. Not because her life had been easy, because it had been fully lived. Lila carried that lesson forward. Years became decades. Her children grew, then had children of their own. The valley changed. The world changed. Life brought both joy and sorrow. Some worries she had once carried eventually came true. Many never did. The realization was important, because even when genuine difficulties arrived, she handled them better than she had handled imaginary ones. Reality, she discovered, was often easier than fear. Fear demanded endless rehearsal. Reality only required presence. As an old woman herself, Lila eventually became known for her wisdom. People came seeking advice. Young parents worried about their children. Farmers worried about future harvests. Merchants worried about uncertain markets. Everyone seemed to be carrying tomorrow. Whenever possible, she shared the same lesson. Not through long lectures, through questions. What can you do today? The answer often changed everything. One evening, near the end of her life, Lila sat beside the same river where Amma had first spoken to her many years earlier. The current flowed steadily, just as it always had. The water never hurried, never worried about reaching the sea. It simply moved, moment by moment, bend by bend, day by day. Watching it, Lila smiled. At last, she understood something she'd spent decades learning. Life unfolds exactly this way, not all at once, not a year at a time, not a decade at a time, a moment at a time, a breath at a time, a step at a time. The future eventually becomes the present, and when it does, we meet it exactly as we meet everything else. Here, now, not before, not after. As the evening deepened, she remembered Amma's basket of stones, how heavy it had felt, how unnecessary much of that weight had been. And she realized something beautiful. The future had never asked to be carried. It only asked to be met when it arrived. And perhaps that is the lesson. Many people spend their lives carrying tomorrows that never come, imagining problems that never happen, rehearsing conversations that never occur, fearing storms that never arrive. The burden feels real. The exhaustion feels real. Yet much of the weight comes not from life itself, but from trying to live several lives at once. Today's life, tomorrow's life, next year's life. The life we fear, the life we hope for, the life we imagine. Meanwhile, the only life actually available quietly waits. Here, in this breath, this conversation, this meal, this sunrise, this moment. The future will come, as it always does. But until then, perhaps we can set down the basket. Perhaps we can stop carrying clouds. Perhaps we can trust the road enough to walk it one step at a time. For the person who carries tomorrow everywhere eventually discovers a simple truth. The future becomes lighter the moment we stop trying to carry it before it arrives. With each breath, we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen, where the smallest stone may hold the greatest truth. Here starts the next story. The village of Shiro sat in a wide valley surrounded by forests and mountains. It was a peaceful place. Children played beside streams. Farmers worked fields passed down through generations. Merchants traveled slowly along winding roads. Life was simple, not easy, but simple. Like every village, Shiro experienced joy and sorrow, births and funerals, harvests and droughts, celebrations and disappointments. No one escaped these things. Among the villagers lived a young carpenter named Renji. He was respected throughout the valley. His hands were skilled. His work was precise. Tables, doors, chairs, and bridges crafted by Renji lasted for decades. People trusted him. They admired his patience. Yet beneath his calm exterior lived a mind constantly at war with itself. Whenever something unpleasant happened, Renji suffered twice, sometimes 3 times, sometimes 10 times. A minor mistake would occupy his thoughts for weeks. A criticism would replay in his mind for months. A disappointment would grow larger each time he remembered it. He rarely noticed this habit, because it felt normal. Most people around him behaved similarly. One spring morning, while helping repair a roof, Renji slipped. He fell several feet and injured his shoulder. The injury was not severe. Painful, certainly, but not permanent. The village doctor examined him. "You must rest for several weeks." Renji nodded. Yet as he walked home, something strange began happening. The physical pain remained in his shoulder, but another kind of pain appeared inside his mind. Why did this happen? What if it never heals properly? What if I cannot work again? What will people think? What if customers stop coming? What if this ruins everything? By evening, the mental suffering exceeded the physical injury. His shoulder hurt, but his thoughts hurt more. The following days became miserable, not because the injury worsened, because Renji constantly fed it with fear. Every ache became evidence of disaster. Every discomfort became a prediction. Every uncertainty became a threat. Eventually, his wife grew concerned. "You seem more troubled than injured." Renji frowned. "My shoulder hurts." "I know." She looked at him gently. "But something else hurts too." He did not answer, because he knew she was right. Several days later, an elderly monk arrived in the village. His name was Venerable Taro. He often traveled between mountain monasteries, stopping briefly in villages along the way. People respected him, not because he performed miracles, because he listened carefully. When Renji's wife suggested visiting him, The carpenter resisted. What could a monk possibly know about injuries? Still, boredom and frustration eventually persuaded him. One afternoon, he walked to the temple where Taro was staying. The monk welcomed him warmly. After tea was served, Renji explained everything: the fall, the injury, the fear, the frustration, the uncertainty. The old monk listened quietly. When Renji finished, Taro asked, "Does your shoulder hurt right now?" "Yes." The monk nodded, then asked, "And what else hurts?" Renji looked confused. "What do you mean?" The monk smiled. "Besides the shoulder." The carpenter opened his mouth, then closed it again, because he suddenly realized the answer. Fear hurt, worry hurt, anger hurt, frustration hurt. The injury was not alone. The monk continued, "Imagine a man walking through the forest." Renji listened. Suddenly, an arrow strikes his leg. The old monk paused. "It hurts." "Of course." The carpenter nodded. "Then imagine the man immediately shoots himself with a second arrow." Renji frowned. "Why would anyone do that?" The monk smiled. "Exactly." Silence filled the room. Finally, Taro continued. "The first arrow is unavoidable pain. The second arrow is everything we add to it." The words settled slowly. The monk continued. "The injury is the first arrow. The fear is the second. The anger is the second. The endless worrying is the second. The stories about what might happen are the second." Renji stared at the floor. Something about the image felt painfully accurate. For days he had been shooting himself with second arrows, again and again. The injury remained, yet he had multiplied his suffering through resistance. That evening, he returned home thinking about arrows. Not medicine, not recovery, arrows. The next morning, his shoulder still hurt. The first arrow remained. But when fearful thoughts appeared, he noticed them differently. Second arrow. When frustration arose, second arrow. When catastrophic predictions appeared, second arrow. The practice did not eliminate suffering immediately, but it created space. For the first time, he could distinguish between pain and the story surrounding pain. Several weeks later, his shoulder improved. The physical injury healed exactly as the doctor predicted, yet the lesson remained, and life quickly provided opportunities to practice it. One summer afternoon, a wealthy customer rejected a piece of furniture Renji had spent weeks creating. The criticism stung. The first arrow landed. Disappointment, embarrassment, frustration. Then the familiar thoughts arrived. "I'm not good enough. My reputation is ruined. Everyone will hear about this. The business will fail." But now he recognized them. Second arrows. He smiled despite himself. The rejection still hurt, yet not nearly as much as before. Months passed. The lesson deepened. One autumn, heavy rains destroyed part of the harvest. Farmers throughout the valley became distressed. Some worried constantly about winter. Others argued with neighbors. Several blamed themselves. Several blamed fate. Several blamed the weather. The suffering spread far beyond the damaged crops. One evening, Renji found himself discussing the situation with Taro. The monk listened, then asked, "Did the rain create all this suffering?" The carpenter considered carefully. Partly, but not entirely. The ruined crops were real. Yet much of the anguish came from thoughts about the future, thoughts about unfairness, thoughts about what should have happened. Second arrows. The old monk nodded. "You are beginning to see." Years passed. One winter, Renji's father became seriously ill. The illness arrived suddenly. Within weeks, the entire family understood the situation. The old man would not recover. The reality hurt deeply, perhaps more deeply than anything Renji had experienced. The first arrow felt enormous. He loved his father. The impending loss was real, painful, unavoidable. For several days, grief consumed him. Then one evening, while sitting beside his father's bed, he noticed something. Alongside sadness lived another suffering. Resistance. A desperate demand that reality become different. A refusal to accept what was happening. The second arrow had returned. Not through fear this time, through attachment, through the belief that life should not change. Tears filled his eyes, because he finally understood something important. The Buddha never taught that pain could be avoided. Even enlightened beings grow old, become ill, lose loved ones, experience sorrow. The first arrow belongs to everyone. The second arrow is optional, not easy to avoid, but optional. His father passed away peacefully several weeks later. The grief remained, yet something felt different. Renji mourned fully, cried openly, remembered lovingly, without adding unnecessary resistance. The experience transformed him. Many years later, people began seeking his advice. Not because he became a monk, not because he became famous, because he had become wise. One day, a young woman visited him after the end of a relationship. Her heartbreak was obvious. She cried throughout most of the conversation. Renji listened patiently, then asked, "What hurts most?" The woman immediately described abandonment, loneliness, loss, the first arrow. Then gradually she revealed something else. Fear she would never be loved again. Shame about what others might think. Anger toward herself. Anger toward her former partner. The second arrows. When she finally paused, Renji gently explained the teaching, not as philosophy, as experience. The woman listened carefully, then asked, "So I should stop feeling sad?" Renji shook his head. "No. Sadness is natural. Sadness is the first arrow." He smiled kindly. "Let yourself feel it." The woman looked relieved, because many people confuse acceptance with suppression. The teaching was never about denying pain, only about not multiplying it. Years continued flowing by. The village changed. Children became adults. Adults became elders. New houses appeared. Old houses disappeared. Through it all, Renji continued observing arrows, everywhere. A merchant lost money and added shame. Second arrow. A farmer experienced drought and added resentment. Second arrow. A young man failed an examination and added self-hatred. Second arrow. The pattern seemed endless. One spring morning, while working beside the river, Renji watched a child fall from a bicycle. The boy scraped his knee and immediately began crying. The injury was minor, yet moments later another child approached. Instead of helping, he laughed. The injured boy's crying intensified. Renji smiled sadly. There it was again. The first arrow, then the second. The lesson seemed woven into every aspect of life. Late in life, Renji visited Taro one final time. The old monk now lived permanently in a mountain temple. Age had slowed him considerably, yet his eyes remained bright. The two men sat overlooking a valley filled with autumn colors. After a long silence, Renji asked, "Master, why do people keep shooting second arrows?" The monk laughed softly. "Because they don't realize they are holding the bow." The answer felt perfect, simple, direct, true. For many years, Renji reflected on those words. Most suffering added itself automatically, habitually, unconsciously. People rarely noticed the moment they picked up the bow, yet awareness changed everything. As old age approached, Renji experienced new forms of pain. His joints ached, his eyesight weakened, his energy declined. The first arrows multiplied, yet surprisingly, he became more peaceful. Not because life became easier, because he stopped arguing with reality. One evening, his grandson asked, "Grandfather, are you afraid of getting old?" Renji smiled. "I don't enjoy the aching knees." The boy laughed. "But are you afraid?" The old carpenter looked toward the sunset, then answered honestly, "Sometimes." The boy seemed surprised. "You still get afraid?" "Of course," Renji smiled. "The difference is that I no longer build a house for the fear to live in." The child did not fully understand, but one day he would. Because life teaches everyone about arrows. Every person experiences pain. Every person experiences loss. Every person encounters disappointment. The first arrow never asks permission. It arrives. The Buddha understood this deeply. He never promised a life without difficulty. Instead, he pointed towards something liberating. The realization that much suffering comes not from events themselves, but from our relationship to them. Pain becomes suffering, loss becomes bitterness, fear becomes panic, because we add layer after layer, arrow after arrow. The teaching does not eliminate sadness. It does not eliminate grief. It does not eliminate pain. It simply asks a question. After the first arrow lands, must we keep shooting? The answer changes everything. For perhaps the greatest freedom available to us is not controlling what happens, but learning how to respond. Learning to feel pain without becoming pain. Learning to experience grief without becoming trapped by grief. Learning to meet difficulty without multiplying it. The first arrow may be unavoidable, but the second arrow rests in our hands, and wisdom begins the moment we notice the bow. The path of Zen unfolds like morning mist, soft and patient. In this next tale, we are invited to see, beyond appearance, into essence. Listen carefully to the next story. In a quiet monastery near the edge of a pine forest, there was a small ceramic bowl that everyone knew. It was not made of gold. It was not decorated with jewels. It was not rare or expensive. Yet the monks treated it with care. The bowl was white, with a thin blue line painted around its rim. Its surface showed small marks from years of use. A faint crack ran along one side, carefully repaired with golden lacquer. Every morning, the bowl was placed on the table in the meditation hall. It held fresh water, nothing more. The monks said the bowl reminded them of gratitude, clear water, simple need, enough. Among the youngest students in the monastery was a boy named Miko. Miko was kind-hearted, but careless. He moved quickly. He forgot instructions. He often reached before looking. One morning, while helping clean the meditation hall, Miko lifted the bowl from the table. He meant to carry it carefully, but his sleeve caught the edge of a candle stand. He stumbled. The bowl slipped from his hands. For one brief moment, it hung in the air. Then it struck the stone floor. The sound echoed sharply through the hall. The bowl broke into several pieces. Miko froze. His face turned pale. Several monks turned toward him. No one spoke. The boy looked at the broken pieces scattered across the floor. His throat tightened. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The abbot, an elderly monk named Master Hosen, walked slowly toward him. Miko lowered his head, expecting anger. Instead, Hosen knelt beside the broken bowl. He picked up one piece, then another. His movements were gentle. After a long silence, he asked, "Miko, what do you see?" The boy's eyes filled with tears. "I ruined it." The old monk nodded. "That is one way to see." Miko looked confused. "What else is there?" Hosen held up a piece of the bowl. "This bowl held water for many years." Miko said nothing. "It sat through thousands of mornings." The monk continued. "It served the monastery quietly. It reminded many people to be grateful." He placed the broken piece into Miko's hands. "Now it teaches one more lesson." The boy looked down at the fragment. "What lesson?" Master Hosen smiled softly. "That even when something breaks, not everything is lost." The words entered the quiet hall. The monks began helping gather the pieces. Later that day, Hosen and Miko sat together near the garden. The broken bowl rested between them on a cloth. Miko still looked ashamed. The old monk asked, "Are you sad because the bowl broke?" "Yes." "Or because you broke it?" Miko hesitated. "Both." Hosen nodded. "That is honest." The wind moved gently through the trees. Then the old monk said, "Many people suffer because they believe only perfect things deserve gratitude." Miko listened. A perfect bowl, a perfect day, a perfect family, a perfect life. He touched one of the broken pieces. "But life is rarely perfect." Miko whispered, "Then what should we be grateful for?" The old monk smiled. "For what remains." The next morning, the bowl did not sit on the table. Its absence felt strange. Miko noticed it immediately. For days, he avoided looking at the empty space. Then Master Hosen gave him a task. "Come with me." They carried the broken pieces to a small workshop behind the monastery. There the old monk prepared lacquer mixed with gold powder. Carefully, slowly, he began joining the fragments. Miko watched. It took many days. Each piece had to be placed gently. Each seam had to be sealed. Each crack had to be honored rather than hidden. At first, Miko thought the bowl would look ugly. But as the repair continued, something unexpected happened. The golden lines formed a pattern. The bowl no longer looked the same. It looked changed, marked, but beautiful. When the repair was finished, Master Hosen placed the bowl back in the meditation hall. The monks gathered around it. Miko stared. The bowl was broken and whole, both at once. Master Hosen filled it with water. The bowl held. Miko smiled for the first time in days. Years passed. Miko grew older. He became more careful, though never perfect. No one is. Whenever he made mistakes, he remembered the bowl. Whenever someone else made mistakes, he remembered the bowl. He learned that anger often sees only the breaking. Wisdom looks for what can still be held. One winter, a traveler came to the monastery. He had lost his home in a fire. He carried nothing but a small bag of clothing. His face was hollow with grief. "I have nothing left," he told the monks. Miko, now a young man, listened quietly. Then he brought the traveler to the meditation hall. He pointed to the bowl. The traveler looked at it. "It is beautiful." Miko nodded. "It was broken." The traveler leaned closer and saw the golden seams. Miko said, "It could not become what it is now without first becoming broken." The traveler's eyes filled with tears. For the first time since the fire, he breathed deeply. Not because his loss disappeared. It did not. But because he understood that brokenness was not always the end of a story. Many seasons passed. The bowl remained in the meditation hall. Visitors often admired it. Some loved its simplicity. Others loved the golden cracks. But those who knew its story saw something deeper. They saw a child's mistake, an old monk's patience, a lesson in gratitude, a reminder that life can still hold meaning after damage. And perhaps that is the lesson. Everyone will one day hold something broken, a plan, a relationship, a dream, a season of life, a part of themselves. At first, we may see only what has been lost, the missing pieces, the sharp edges, the crack running through what once seemed whole. But wisdom asks us to look again. What remains? What can still be repaired? What can still hold water? Gratitude does not mean pretending nothing broke. It means honoring what is still here, the breath still moving, the love still remembered, the lesson still available, the heart still capable of kindness. The bowl may never look the way it once did, but perhaps beauty is not found only in what has never been damaged. Perhaps beauty also lives in what has been broken, repaired, and returned gently to service. So when something breaks, mourn it. Hold it carefully. Gather the pieces. But do not forget to look for what remains. For sometimes the golden lines of healing become part of the beauty itself. In the hush of understanding, Zen offers us another glimpse of what it means to recognize worth not by weight or shine, but by presence. Here starts the next story. The old maple tree stood alone on a hillside overlooking the valley. It had stood there longer than anyone could remember, longer than the oldest villagers, longer than the oldest stories, longer even than the stone path that wound up the hill toward the temple. Generation after generation had passed beneath its branches. Children climbed it, travelers rested beneath it, birds nested within it, seasons moved through it, yet the tree remained. In spring, fresh green leaves appeared. In summer, the canopy spread wide and generous. In autumn, the hillside blazed with gold and crimson. In winter, the branches stood bare against the sky. Then the cycle began again. Most people admired the tree. Few paid close attention to what it was teaching. Among the monks living at the nearby temple was a man named Haru. Haru had entered monastic life many years earlier. He was disciplined, thoughtful, respected. Yet he struggled with something he rarely discussed. He had difficulty letting go, not of possessions. Monastic life had already simplified those. He struggled to let go of memories, old mistakes, old regrets, old hurts. Conversations from years ago still visited him. Embarrassing moments, painful losses, missed opportunities. The mind carried them like stones hidden beneath a robe. Most people never noticed. Haru barely noticed anymore. The burden had become familiar. One autumn morning, the abbot asked him to repair a section of the hillside path. The work required several days. Each morning, Haru climbed the hill carrying tools. Each evening he returned. The old maple tree stood nearby throughout the process. On the first day, its leaves glowed brilliantly. Gold, orange, red. The colors seemed almost unreal. The monk admired them briefly, then returned to work. Several days later, a strong wind arrived. Leaves began falling, thousands of them. They drifted through the air like sparks from a fire. The hillside transformed. The tree slowly emptied itself. Haru watched while working. The sight stirred something he could not explain. That evening, he mentioned it to the abbot. "The tree seems different." The old monk smiled. It is. It is losing everything." The abbot looked toward the window. "Is it?" Haru frowned. "What else would you call it?" The old monk laughed softly. "Perhaps making room." The answer lingered. The following morning, Haru returned to the path. More leaves had fallen. The ground beneath the tree was covered. Yet something appeared strange. The tree did not look distressed. It did not seem frightened. It did not cling to its leaves. It simply released them, one by one, branch by branch. The process appeared natural, effortless. The monk found himself strangely envious. For years, he had been carrying things much older than those leaves, things no longer useful, things no longer alive. Yet he continued holding them. Why? The question followed him throughout the day. Several weeks later, a traveling merchant arrived at the temple. The man carried many possessions, several carts, numerous assistants, boxes filled with expensive goods. Yet despite his wealth, he seemed exhausted. During dinner, he complained constantly about business rivals, past betrayals, old arguments, lost opportunities. The list never ended. Afterward, Haru walked with the abbot. The old monk smiled. "He reminds me of someone." Haru laughed. "Who?" The abbot glanced sideways. "You." The younger monk stopped walking. The old man continued. "You carry different things, but you carry them just the same." The words landed heavily, because they felt true. That winter, snow covered the hillside. The maple tree stood bare. Its branches reached into the grey sky. Many visitors assumed it looked lifeless. The monks knew better. Life remained, invisible, waiting. One afternoon, while meditating near the tree, Haru noticed something. The branches did not mourn the missing leaves. They did not seem diminished. They simply existed, completely present. The realization felt important. For years, he had believed letting go meant losing something. Perhaps that belief was wrong. Perhaps letting go created space, the way autumn created space for winter, the way winter created space for spring, the way an empty bowl creates space for tea. The thought stayed with him. Several months later, spring arrived. Tiny buds appeared along the branches, then leaves, fresh, green, new. The transformation amazed him. The tree had not suffered because it released the old leaves. It had flourished because it released them. The lesson deepened. What if the same principle applied to people? What if holding everything prevented renewal? What if clinging blocked growth? The possibility felt both hopeful and uncomfortable because it implied responsibility. One evening, Haru sat alone reviewing old memories. A mistake from his youth surfaced, one he had replayed countless times. Normally he would analyze it again, judge it again, regret it again. Instead, he imagined the maple tree, autumn wind, falling leaves, branch releasing what no longer belonged. The memory remained, but something changed. For the first time, he stopped gripping it. The experience felt strange, like unclenching a fist after years. Nothing dramatic happened, no lightning, no revelation, just a small release, a little less weight, a little more space. Years passed. The practice continued, not perfectly, not constantly, but consistently. Whenever old resentments appeared, Haru remembered the leaves. Whenever regrets resurfaced, he remembered the leaves. Whenever attachment tightened around his thoughts, he remembered the leaves. Gradually, the burden grew lighter. One autumn, a young novice approached him. The boy looked troubled. "I cannot stop thinking about something." Haru smiled. "What happened?" The novice described an argument, an insult, a painful misunderstanding. The details mattered less than the pattern. The young monk carried it everywhere, like a stone. Haru listened carefully, then led him to the maple tree. Autumn had arrived once again. Leaves drifted gently from the branches. The novice watched silently. After several minutes, Haru asked, "What is the tree doing?" losing its leaves. The older monk nodded. Why? The novice shrugged. Because it has to. Haru smiled. Exactly. The lesson began working immediately, not because it solved the boy's problem, because it changed his relationship with it. The years flowed onward. The maple tree continued its cycles: spring, summer, autumn, winter, again and again. The tree became famous among the monks, not for its beauty, though it was beautiful, for its teaching. Many visitors sat beneath it. Many lessons emerged there. Each person saw something different, yet most discovered the same truth eventually. Nothing can be held forever. Not possessions, not emotions, not seasons, not identities, not even life itself. The attempt creates suffering. The release creates freedom. Late in life, Haru climbed the hillside one final autumn. His hair had turned white. His steps had slowed. The maple tree remained. Golden leaves filled its branches. The site looked exactly as it had decades earlier, and entirely different. The old monk sat beneath the canopy. Leaves drifted around him. One landed gently in his lap. He picked it up, studied its color, its shape, its delicate veins, beautiful and temporary. The combination felt perfect. For a long time, he simply sat, watching leaves fall, watching clouds move, watching the afternoon light change. Nothing needed improvement. Nothing needed holding. Nothing needed resisting. The lesson had finally become part of him. Several days later, a young monk asked, "Master, what is the secret to peace?" Haru smiled, then pointed toward the maple tree. The novice looked confused. "The tree?" The old monk nodded. "What does it teach?" The younger monk thought carefully. "It lets go." Haru smiled. "Yes." The novice waited. The older monk continued. "Every year." The simplicity felt profound, because wisdom often is. And perhaps that is the lesson. Many people spend years holding things that life is asking them to release. Old anger, old guilt, old identities, old expectations, old versions of themselves. The grip becomes so familiar, they mistake it for necessity. Yet nature teaches something different. The tree does not keep last year's leaves. The river does not keep yesterday's water. The sky does not keep last season's clouds. Life renews itself through release. The Buddha taught that clinging creates suffering because reality is constantly changing. We try to hold what must move, keep what must leave, preserve what must transform. The struggle exhausts us. Letting go does not mean forgetting. It does not mean pretending something never mattered. The tree does not reject its leaves. It simply releases them when their season ends. We can do the same. Honor the memory, learn the lesson, appreciate the experience, then allow it to fall, so that something new may grow. Like the old maple tree on the hillside, we too become lighter when we stop carrying every season forever. And in that release, we discover that losing is not always the opposite of growing. Sometimes it is the beginning of it. As the lantern of awareness glows a little brighter, we come to a tale about seeing with more than the eyes. Let the stillness guide you now, and listen carefully to the next story.